Hi, Moss here with an interesting pair of IEMs that were released at the recent Tokyo Headphone Festival, and these are the Campfire Andromeda MW10 Limited. Now these were made for MW, stands for MixWave, which is their distributor in Japan, and they've been working with them for 10 years. Actually, the first foreign manufacturer I met when I first went to one of the shows in Tokyo in 2011 was Campfire Audio. Actually, it was ALO Audio at the time. This is before Campfire and before the IEMs. So they've been working with them for a long time, and this is a limited edition special version for them. And it's been quite an interesting pair to listen with, as they have made some changes and improvements. But before we talk about that, here is a pair of original Andromedas. I'll just hold up one. That should do for now. This is a very, very original pair before they did the extra chamfering on the edges. And I've been comparing it with the MW10 version and the Solaris. Here's the good old Solaris, which I reviewed not too long ago as well. So it's been interesting. I've got on all of them, I'm just going to start by saying I've put spiral dot tips on all of them. And if you haven't seen these tips, if you haven't watched my other videos, they have a series of spiral of dots in there. Kind of like you have like dimples on a golf ball, help the aerodynamics of golf balls. These help the aerodynamics of the sound going through. And there's a new version which has a kind of stronger bass there. I should do a separate video on these, but the original version I've actually got on the Andromedas at the moment, because the kind of softer, wider, they slip on much easier. Although narrower bore IEMs, they don't slip on as well, so hence the newer design. So you can see, as usual, the Andromeda MW10s use a 5-driver complement. There's 2 highs, 1 mid and 2 lows, but they've improved the design of the crossover has changed, so they've improved the crossover, and they've used a 3D printed ceramic chamber. And the thing about the Andromedas is that Ken always said, well, once he did the best he could with the Andromedas, he struggled to decide he struggled on improving them. He couldn't improve them, and I mean the improvement came in the Solaris in a sense, where he substituted the low end with dynamic drivers, or a dynamic driver, I should say, But you can see there's some other external changes as well. I think you've made it in the industry when people start pirating your stuff, and there are pirate versions out there. So if you find any really cheap Andromedas without a box, well, it's pirated. You made it when you've been copied. But nothing. Everyone I remember used to say, how does any pair of IEMs compare to the Andromedas? They became kind of the gold standard, which is really amazing. And considering that Ken went backwards. He went, most manufacturers might manufacture, a pair of IEMs or headphones and then manufacture audio gear and then manufacture cables. He went backwards. He started with cables as ALO audio, then manufactured portable DACs and amps, which he still does, although less so. And then once that kind of DAPs took over, portable players that is, he went to manufacturing IEMs and took off and became, as I said, made after a bit of hit and miss, and he's been a bit hit and miss with some of his designs. The Andromeda is still pretty close to the kind of the gold standard. But, there are a lot of good stuff out there, but I think it just set a particular bar. And to improve on that, it's pretty tough call. When you've done the best you can, how do you do better than the best you've done? And this is if it becomes a full regular version, this is the MW10, is that. And I'd say it improves. It's a lot more expensive. It's about, the limited edition in Japan at today's exchange rate is about $1,700, which is a lot more than the $1,200 the Andromeda is selling for. And apologies if I'm wrong on price, because things seem to change and go around. But sound, you're probably wondering, well, they come with the nice cable that comes with the Solaris. I've got 3 here, and the question is which one do I pick off the side of the table to. It's a silver plated copper lits. I don't need to show the whole thing. He's removed, thankfully, the wire, the memory wire, as now just uses a memory plastic on the other end. These are some of the old cables. I won't show the other end because I've got the old cables on. Anyway, I've got a tangle of cables just off screen, and which I've been doing A/B listening with. So because I've got both single-ended and balanced, it's been very easy to do, and have them plugged into any 2 pairs plugged into the Hugo 2 at the same time. So to note again, I've been primarily listening with the Hugo 2, and also I've been using spiral dot tips, and there'd be, of course, primarily with the Solaris, because they do have a dynamic driver. There's a bit more variation with tip selection than there is with the Andromedas. But I wanted to give a bit of my general impressions. To start with, you have still a fairly typical Andromeda sound. You still have a little bit kind of warm towards the mid bass. They were fairly even in sound, so start with an even move up from the bass through to the mid range, kind of like the old style that planar dynamic headphones were, like the Odyssey LCD2s. Maybe closer to the LCD-X, which had more treble. So the LCD2 Classic is probably a little bit dark for my taste. Closer to the LCD-X, which may be a little bit thick in the lower mids, and but still a good, a pretty, not too bright and not too dark treble. And maybe on music that's a little bit hot in the treble, it does come through as a little bit too hot with all the Andromedas, actually all of these. And music that's a little bit dark, well, it's got enough brightness in there to make it sound good. I think where they really, the Solaris, just to jump to the Solaris, really shined with live acoustic sets. This was where it's king. It has the low bass came through really well, but the kind of mid bass was a little bit shy in there and a bit more focused towards the upper mids, which put the focus on instruments, and that worked really well with live music, giving a sense of space. And you can't really have a true sense of 3D space without using the pinna of your ear, and IEMs of course bypass that. So it gave just enough sense of space and just the right amount of sparkle on top. And you could do a little bit of fine tuning with the tips. You put the included final Type E tips in there for a little bit darker, and the spiral dots for a little bit brighter. But the Andromedas maybe didn't have quite a little bit more, again, a little bit thicker in the mid bass. Maybe the low bass wasn't as good quality as you can get with a dynamic, but the treble was pretty excellent. And it maybe had just the slightest hint of what some people call balanced armature treble, which is maybe if you've compared it to like the electric drivers and some of the IEMs, that's kind of seems to eliminate that. But Ken's he doesn't like the electric drivers. He has kept with balanced armature, and at least with the spiral dot tips, I think he's pretty much eliminated most of the kind of balanced armature signature, especially with these. And I'd probably say with the spiral dots, it kind of eliminates it from my impressions. And kind of the balanced armature treble, I don't know how to explain it best, but it kind of sounds a little bit hazy or unnatural. I can't really give a good description. But anyway, these, compared to the Andromedas, are a little bit more interesting. There's a little bit more dynamic in the sound. Like, these seem a little bit more easygoing and relaxed in the presentation. These have a little bit more, I think the closest analogy I can give you is kind of like a bit of bloom that you get with tube amps. A little bit more. The first thing I noticed when I tried them at the show was that the bloom in the mid-range. It was not big, but it gives the mid-range a kind of emphasis, and it really works well to give the kind of feeling of instruments and vocals. And so anything through the mid-range you like, if you like guitars, violins, piano, whatever you like, if you're big into acoustic music, as I am, it works really, really well. So small jazz ensembles, fantastic. Anything basically where you want to focus on the mid-range, it does really, really well. It still has that sense of a bit of, with regular music, the lower mid-bass is still a little bit kind of thick. But what's really worked well was a Chesky album, Jazz in the New Harmonic. And this is one of David Chesky's offbeat albums, which is really exceptionally well recorded. There's a lot of subtlety in the album. You can really, it's now going to become my gold standard for testing for reproduction of cymbals. And it really has the delicacy of the cymbals and the decay really comes through well on these, as it does on the Solaris. It does through on all of them, but it comes through even so beautifully with these, especially with the spiral dot tips. I was really impressed by that. Switching to the Solaris, there's a bit more sense of space. There's a bit more kind of precision in the very low end. But the instruments, because of that, comparatively a little bit further back and a little bit less intense. But so you have a little bit more kind of width and space, probably partly from a great deal from the tuning. Whereas these bring the instruments more forward and more dynamic, make them more kind of dynamic and in your face, and a little bit more closed in sounding. But still spacious all the same. Spacious from detail rather than spacious from tuning. These are kind of more the original Andromedas are more relaxed and still very good, but kind of less interesting, I would say. The sound is kind of extremely competent, but less interesting. And so these are really in the new MW10 version, if it does become the new Andromeda, is really intensively enjoyable to listen for that kind of jazz music. With regular music, I mean, I went through a lot of my regular stuff that I listen to in the car, which is less well recorded, and then it's kind of like, oh, well, much of a muchness between them. There's bits and pieces. I mean, these will go down and do deep bass well, not as well as these will. These are a little bit too hot sounding on kind of modern music, which can be a little bit, hot in the treble. And, well, I mean, so can these. I mean, again, you just change tips, and you can tune them a little bit, maybe not quite as much as these. Where these all shine is with really high quality acoustic music like that jazz and the new harmonic. And I tested them with other stuff. One example, the new basement tapes, to test the low bass. And again, it was much the same thing. It was a little bit bloomy with the Andromedas in general, both versions, old and we'll call this new, even though it's just a limited edition. And the Solaris, a little bit less thick sounding, but very good with the low bass. So, as an improvement overall on the Andromeda, if this becomes the variation that becomes a new Andromeda in the future, well, fantastic, because it gives a more, like a slightly tube-like, bloomy feel to acoustic music, while keeping the very fine detail very much there. So, as an acoustic music, it doesn't quite have, it's a little bit of a different, as I said, a little bit different presentation compared to the Solaris, which is a bit more space, a bit more, a few rows further back kind of feeling, but with that deeper rumble. But these are more focused on the mid-range and made that jazz, that David Teskey jazz, and similar things very beautifully enjoyable to listen with. Even if it doesn't have quite some of the capability of something like the Solaris. So, I hope that's just a quick overview of the Campfire Andromeda MW10s. Really fantastic, that could improve on the Andromedas, and I think these are fantastic. I'll just say that much. And if they become, as I said already 3 times in the video, if they become the new Andromeda, well, that will be excellent for everyone who buys them. If they stay up at that price at $1,700, well, ouch. But still, for acoustic music, people who love their acoustic music and love, really hearing up close to what the player is doing in that kind of expression, these are just really fantastic. So, as usual, thanks once again for watching, and thank you all my supporters for supporting these videos. If you'd like my buying advice, as always, for a couple of bucks a month, like buy me a coffee once in a while, do consider signing up. You probably may save way more than $2 from not making bad decisions with my help, I hope. Give the video a like if you did enjoy it. Any questions, comments, and constructive criticism, please post them below. Did you get a pair? Did you find someone in Japan to send you a pair? If you did, let me know what your impressions were below and what kind of music you listen to. And also thanks Mascobo for providing some studio grade microphones, which is why my voice sounds much better than it used to. So thanks once again for watching, and I'll see you online.